A scarily common creation amongst the armies of chaos are the warp-infused mechanical monstrosities known as Daemon Engines. These combinations of demon and machine are brutally powerful assets to armies both mortal and demonic, and they can easily overwhelm their enemies both physically and mentally. Whilst we have addressed them in a log long ago, there have been many new demon engines that have come to our attention since then, and in hindsight, I feel that many of the older engines deserve some expansion and explanation a little more than I gave them back then. So, like with the Adeptus Custodes, consider this an addendum to that log, expanding on the engines discussed before, as well as introducing some of the newer ones. This is Tactica Imperialis, and welcome to 40k Stories. The first thing to do for those who missed the original log or who have otherwise forgotten the details is to recap the process behind the creation of Daemon Engines. The basic summary can be described by a very simple equation. Machine plus demon equals Daemon Engine. There is a lot more that goes into it, with getting the demon into the machine being one of the major challenges, but that's the principle of it at its most basic level. The mechanical hulls are typically fabricated by one of two sources, either a mortal such as a warpsmith, the corrupted equivalent to a tech marine, with the potential aid of sorcerers or dark apostles, or by the demonic Forge of Souls that is also the source of power for the aforementioned warpsmiths. Once the hull is ready, a demon is summoned and or bound into it. Some go willingly, seeking the power and time in the materium potentially provided by becoming a demon engine, whilst others have to be forced into the hull by the sorcerers and whatnot, since I doubt that every demon, particularly the more powerful one, is keen on the idea. Once the process is complete, the demon is effectively the machine spirit for the demon engine. Its infusion into the hull gives it total control of the vehicle's systems, and the corrupting influence that always comes from warp exposure probably somewhat twists the physical form of the machine as well. I should stress that, as far as I know at least, there is a difference, though it may be a little bit subtle, between a demon engine and a demonically possessed vehicle. In the latter case, I believe that the demon bound to the vehicle is more a replacement for crew and cohabits with the machine spirit, whilst demon engines don't have a machine spirit, just a demon. I might have that slightly wrong, but I believe that to be the case. Once the demon engine has been created, the bond between demon and machine cannot be broken unless the engine itself is destroyed. I can't think of a case where this doesn't also cause the banishment of the bound demon, though it does not prevent it being used as part of an engine in future. For example, the soul grinders are not allowed to escape their new mechanical forms until their debt to the Forge of Souls has been paid. See the previous log for more details. Whilst demon engines are undoubtedly wicked combatants upon the battlefield, blending demonic fury with mechanical strength and resilience, they are no safer to be around for the forces of chaos or anyone else unfortunate enough to be in proximity. Like many things demonic, demon engines exude an aura of madness and death that can drive any nearby insane, and they are constantly enraged and out of control. Not even the warpsmith or sorcerer responsible for their creation have any sort of leash on them, and so when not unleashed on the foes of the dark gods, the engines are usually kept in chains lest they wreak havoc on the chaos forces around them. I pity anyone charged with restraining, recovering, or unleashing a demon engine before or after a battle. Most will die, many will go nuts or have the demon's presence invade their minds, but whatever systems are in place seem to work well enough that the engines are not simply destroyed when the fight is over. As far as design goes, there is a great degree of variety among the demon engines, which is no surprise given their partly demonic nature and the much less standardized design based on the whim of the warpsmith. That said, there do seem to be some general patterns that seem to provide a baseline, so let's discuss a few of those in more detail. To start this deeper dive off, let's look at the demon engines of Chaos Undivided. We've discussed the Soul Grinder and Defiler before, but there are plenty more. The first are as near to a twin pair as I think demon engines can really get. The quadrupedal and almost animalistic Mauler Fiend and Forge Fiend. The Mauler Fiend is arguably nearer to six-limbed, and it can certainly use its front two for mobility whilst the Forge Fiend cannot, and the pair of them fulfill broadly opposite roles in a Chaos army. The Forge Fiend is designed for long-range engagements, whilst the Mauler Fiend is almost entirely oriented toward melee. Starting with the Mauler Fiend, this demon engine is armed primarily with Power Fists and the ensnaring Lasher Tendrils for melee, ripping apart or flat out pulverizing their enemies. It also has weapons known as Magma Cutters, which provide some more heavy armor penetration, as if a giant demon engine with massive fists didn't have enough of that already. The demon that inhabits it also fuels the machine's power entirely, and this demon forge can be overcharged to provide a much greater power boost even if it isn't strictly safe. All that sounds terrifying, I must admit, but the Mauler Fiend has another weapon in its locker. Speed and agility probably unparalleled by anything mechanical that isn't either Slaaneshi or Eldari in nature. It has the ability to lock on to targets over vast distances and pursue at great speed. Even walls and bunkers present little obstacle, as Mauler Fiends are capable of scaling them or just ripping apart the slightest weak spots. If they were a bit calmer, I suspect Mauler Fiends would be adept scouts and hunters despite their lack of stealth, but commonly they are relegated to sort of living battering rams used to crack open besieged defences or particularly tough enemy lines. By contrast, the Forge Fiend uses its front two arms to bring death from afar, mounting massive ranged weapons in place of both of them and even in place of its maw. Like the Mauler Fiend, it contains the Demon Forge power booster, but the power does not seem entirely demonic on this occasion, as there are also several of what are known as soul furnaces too, and no, I don't really want to know any more about them. There are two main variants of Forge Fiend, one armed with a massive demonically powered Hades autocannons, and another armed with ectoplasma cannons that actually channel warp energy to launch souls at the engine's enemies. And unlike a conventional war machine, the Forge Fiend has effectively infinite ammo in both of these configurations. Warp energy and souls aren't exactly in short supply as long as the process is unhindered, and the engine can devour any metal it comes across and convert it into more bullets. And as we know, there's usually a lot of metal lying around on battlefields via ammo casings, debris, wrecked tanks, armor, and so on. There is another Demon Forge powered demon engine, though it is not seemingly built in the same manner as the other two. This is the infamous Hell Drake, a flying demon engine that more resembles a tailless dragon than anything else. Unlike the Mauler Fiend and Forge Fiend, a Hell Drake often starts its existence as a regular Astartes fighter aircraft, but the warp has had its way with it over the years and twisted it beyond recognition, as well as assumedly possessing it with a demon. The original Astartes pilot remains inside, fused with the engine and usually no longer in any control, with their hateful emotions providing additional power to the Helldrake. Armed with the aforementioned Hades autocannon or the demonic Baleflamer, Helldrakes form an advanced force in many a Chaos invasion, both in space and in traditional air combat, and unlike almost any other flyer on the battlefield, it doesn't solely rely on guns, as it has claws that can grip onto and destroy other aircraft. Apparently, it's a favourite strategy, would you believe? Interestingly, there is actually a measure of hierarchy and order within the ranks, quote-unquote, of Helldrakes. Older and more powerful ones are able to act as, for want of a better phrase, pack alphas, coordinating and commanding lesser engines. Finally, for now, with Chaos Undivided, there is actually a new engine that has only recently come to mine and the galaxy's attention. There is another one I'm omitting here, but it will be addressed in a future log. This newcomer is an engine called the Venom Crawler, a six-legged monstrosity that seems to have a mechanical spider abdomen-like body. Whilst reports are scarce, those who have encountered it suggest it is able to thin the barrier between reality and the warp. I don't believe it's quite opening a warp rift, but it does mean that any summoners for demons will probably have an easier time knocking around it. I believe it has only recently been encountered as part of the ever-escalating war for Vigilus, so if and when information filters back, I'd be intrigued to learn where exactly it came from and why it's taken so long to build, and also how far I need to be away from it so it doesn't eat me. Since this is an addendum, I won't be covering all of the gods in the same detail. Mainly this is because Slaanesh and Tzeentch have almost no demon engines of their own, so it's just going to be Khorne and Nergal from here on out. First, Nergal, since that has the newer demon engines to discuss as far as I recall. But we'll start with an older one, a Nergal exclusive variant of the Soul Grinder, known as the Plague Hulk. Actually, hang on, why does only Nergal have a unique variant? Come on, other Chaos gods, step your game up. As you might imagine, given what it is based on, the Plague Hulk is a demon engine with 6 mechanical legs with a more demonic upper body. In this case, said upper body closely resembles a giant plague bearer if you ask me, plague, sword, and exposed entrails, and all of that. It is also armed with a ranged weapon known as a rot cannon and a filth-spewing maw, and any who approach it in an attempt to finally put the blimmin' thing down must also try and get past the presumably obscuring and definitely flesh-eating toxic clouds that seem to surround the engine. There is a newer demon engine of Nergal that seems to actually be a variant of an older one, and both of those may well be based on an Imperial war machine known as the Vulturax Stratus Automata that was a common scout and hunter killer for the pre-heresy Martian Mechanicum. Though the infamous Blight drone was touched upon in the previous log, the newer creation is known as the Fetid Bloat drone, a machine possessed supposedly with the most aggressive of Nergal's demons and requiring a high blood sacrifice to create. There are variants of this engine created toward the end of M41 that are geared both toward melee or longer ranged engagements, and usually they work in tandem to some extent. The melee variants are the more rebellious and untrustworthy of demons, and they cut enemies down using a flesh mower, and yes, it is as scary as it sounds, whilst the ranged variants use the chopped up bits and bobs as fuel and ammo for their guns. Both can work alone, but working in packs and feeding off of one another is probably pretty common. There is actually yet another variant on this, though it may or may not actually be a variant per se. This is the Mephitic Blight Hauler, a light engine that seems to be like a bloat drone with no turbines to give it the power of flight. Often acting in packs just as the bloat drones can do, they provide Nergal forces such as the Death Guard with long-ranged anti-armor firepower, but unlike many such troops, it would be unwise to think that closing distance with an artillery piece like this will neutralize it. Blight Haulers are basically sentient and will devour anything that gets too close, turning the devoured matter within its boiler into blackout-inducing gases that can also veil the engine and its nearby allies from ranged attacks. They're as mobile as any other tank or similar in a Nergal force, able to take great punishment thanks to their armour and the resilient flesh typical of Nergal-based creations, and its all-terrain mobility in combination with these factors makes it an increasingly popular choice even if it doesn't seem to have been around for all that long. Another newer Nergal engine was one not actually developed by warpsmiths or by the Forge of Souls, instead being a creation of none other than Mortarion, Primarch of the Death Guard Legion. The Plague Lord sought to create a mobile artillery piece that would eclipse anything built by the Loyalists, who he assumedly hates because he's a traitor, and after months of toil he came up with what is known as the Plague Burst Crawler, which uses a demolisher cannon-like mortar as well as some close support weapons too. They're damn slow, perhaps no surprise given who built it, but they are incredibly relentless and difficult to stop, perhaps extensions of Mortarion's will if you like, though they are difficult to bind and create because Mortarion must just be a bit of a sadist. And if you think you can just hide behind your fortifications and weather the storm of whatever it is that it launches, you're rather out of luck, I'm afraid. The spores created by the primary Plague Burst mortar are demonic, because of course they are, and will corrode even the thickest armour if concentrated enough, or just given enough time, which means you've got to go and kill it, and that means going out to fight the Death Guard, and that's never fun. And now we come to Khorne, and this time we kind of have to stretch what you might expect a demon engine to be, at least in a couple of places. The Blood God definitely has the greatest diversity of demon engines amongst the Chaos God aligned ranks, even more than Undivided, I think. Titanic melee fighters, chariots, even artillery if you can believe that. Said artillery, since that's an easy place to start, is most commonly seen in the form today of the Skull Cannon, forged and then ridden into battle by the same pair of bloodletters. The Order Malleus suspects Khorne himself was involved in the forging process, but that is possibly hyperbole based on how terrifying it is. Given it is an engine of Khorne, it is still capable in melee to some extent. It's crewed by bloodletters if nothing else, and it has a maw that can devour and destroy those in its way. And in a similar manner to the bloat drones, they are able to harness that material. The majority of the corpses are ejected from the machine, but the skulls are infused with power and launched as ammunition, probably where the skull cannon gets its name. It's quite literal. However, the basic chassis of the skull cannon can be converted to a different purpose, one of chariot instead of massive artillery gun. This is the Blood Throne, used by the favoured heralds of Khorne as a status symbol as well as a weapon of war. The throne mounted on the back of the chariot, though I doubt the herald uses it as such once battle is joined, is said to resemble the legendary Skull Throne of Khorne itself within the Brass Citadel. Obviously there isn't an incalculable pile of skulls at the base of this one, but I'm sure that many heralds have claimed a fair tally using their mount and its bloodletter crew. At the other end of the scale, one of the largest demon engines of Khorne is also one forged by mortal hands, the Lord of Skulls. This tracked behemoth is not just possessed by any old demon. Oh no, the Lord of Skulls is inhabited by a bloodthirster, one of Khorne's greater demons. And some of them actually consent to, or maybe even like it. Granted, most of them hate it and see it as an imprisonment of sorts, but some of the lower ranked bloodthirsters, yes, bloodthirsters have ranks, actually look upon the Lord of Skulls as a suit of armour instead of a prison cell. I can understand though why some of them are okay with it to some extent. The Great Cleaver of Khorne, wielded by Lords of Skulls, is pretty much able to disembowel a titan, and it can wield a Gorestorm cannon that dissolves enemies in blood, and it also seems to come with a form of skull cannon on its other arm. Oh, and its power source is the boiling blood of murderers, because of course it is. A smaller, yet still sometimes massive engine is the Brass Scorpion, which looks vaguely like a metallic version of the Terran Scorpion, if you can believe that. Yes, Khorne is not known for original naming conventions. The Order Malleus credit the Dark Mechanicum with its invention, and the variance in both size and armament does seem to suggest a variety perhaps not expected if a single individual or group of individuals was responsible. In any event, the Brass Scorpion is kind of like a Mauler Fiend, in that it is shockingly fast and utterly lethal in melee. It has claws, usually, that can rip apart a bunker or a tank, and its essence seems to delight in slaughter, perhaps even more than the Lord of Skulls and other similar Khornate engines. But whilst the Mauler Fiend is almost entirely about close combat, the Scorpion also has ranged combat nailed down. Its massive tail contains a gun as opposed to a stinger, and it has a selection of shorter ranged weapons designed around flushing out or destroying in-place defenders. And it also has psychic protection in the form of Khornate runes. This isn't unique to the Scorpion, it's quite common for Blood God engines in fact, but I thought I'd mention it now since we're just about done. There are many other demon engines in the service of Khorne, a lot more being about ranged assault than I'd expected when I began compiling for this log, but many of them have become so rare as to almost never appear these days, and hopefully, if I'm honest, they stay that way. From oversized mechanical ticks to massive mortar-based artillery to a tank devoted to launching blood at its enemies a la Lord of Skulls, these things are terrifying, I want nothing to do with them, and I sincerely hope that if there is such a thing as Demon Engine STCs, they got lost or maybe Siege nicked them, because I don't want to see them ever again. And there you have it, an addendum to the discussion of demon engines, shining a light on some of the more infamous modern ones. Even doing a full log like this, I know there are engines I didn't cover, but if you have the misfortune to encounter the Ruinous Powers armies, you should hopefully be a little better informed about what's going to kill you, and trust me, it will. If you do run into one, make sure to detail your findings, damn it! I may never want to face them, but I and the galaxy need to know just what the forces of chaos are able to concoct, and people have a bad habit of not writing things down when they're getting ripped apart by giant demon machines. Anyway, with that little foray complete, it is time for us to move on. All this talking about mechanical war engines in recent logs has given me a hankering for something a little more biological, and there is an ancient log somewhere in the archives that is both outdated and rather poorly put together. There's more information come to light, and with the guillotine perhaps still waiting to fall over Vigilus, yes, I do hear the rumours about the War Master, I'm not that deaf, I think that another race's champion deserves another spell in the spotlight before Abaddon comes and steals it. For now though, thank you for watching Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Goodbye.